Snowboard Room, Episode 2, Take 1.
All right, so guys, today is February 9th, and it's a big day because Overwatch Beta is back.
Yeah.
But I think the big question with Overwatch coming in, Blizzard's put a lot of money into it, is will it be a viable esport? So I'm gonna ask you, Josh, as our knower of all things Blizzard, what are your thoughts on Overwatch as an esport?
I think Overwatch is going to be huge. Definitely, we're going to see it at BlizzCon this year. For the first year of Heroes of the Storm, they did an invitational, but they actually have enough time with the release date here that we could see legitimate competition between qualified teams. In terms of Blizzard's commitment, it seems clear already that they want to balance it for competitive play. They've made changes in the most recent beta where a progression system has been added, but it has no impact on gameplay. So there's no way to get stronger by playing the game. Again, pointing to the fact that they want this to be a game that people can jump into, but also that will act as a viable esport.
I agree, but I think there's a lot of problems that are going to get in the way. If you look at Smite, for example, as a MOBA that's had a lot of problems, is that we've seen that spectator for these sorts of games is really a big problem. And if you don't know specifically exactly what's going on, it just looks like a particle effect nonsense. Like, it's really hard to get a good spectator view from the past broadcasts of Overwatch that I've seen, and there's a lot of obstacles as well that get in the way, like the landscape gets in the way of the action as well, and then maybe they need to find a way to make it like a little bit more transparent. So until Blizzard addresses some of the spectator bugs, I think that might be something that blocks the way.
But what about the fact that you can swap out champions in and out of a game? I mean, in the MOBAs that we know, like Dota, League of Legends, StarCraft, you can't change your race in the middle of the game. Do you think that'll have any impact on the competitive play?
Well, that results in a bit of a barrier of entry because, like, with Counter-Strike, you have like a rotation of guns you have to figure out, but with this you have 21, I believe, heroes to figure out, each with 3 of their own special moves, and like you have to learn all those heroes in order to play it really well.
Yeah, like on that note, how are you gonna create comps to like fight the other comp if the person's gonna constantly be switching it, right? So that's gonna be such a issue in competitive play.
I think we've already seen in competitive play that there is sort of a standard composition, obviously subject to change in all esports, but there isn't like the positions work now that there aren't like one person has to play 20 different heroes. Normally, like a player would have 3 or 4 at the max that they would play routinely. So for the moment, I don't think that that it's going to be an issue. And as with all esports, you know, they figured out a way to make it efficient for each person to specialize in a certain number of heroes to play.
The other thing that hasn't been brought up is actually the direct comparison to TF2 as an esports. I see Josh cringing because, as we all know, or maybe because we're not aware of it, but TF2 competitive is not really a popular thing. But I argue it's not because of the game or the system kind of surrounding it. I think it's more of a lack of support from Valve itself. Valve has Dota, Valve has CSGO. Why bother with TF2 competitive when it's already a cash cow with the skins?
So on that note, what is it that makes a game a competitive esport? Is it the ability to view it, the level, I mean the entry level? What is it that makes a game, a video game, a successful esport?
A community. It's a community that makes something competitive. We've seen it like way back in arcades. You know, you have people gathering on like DDR. You can have DDR competitive. So same with something like Overwatch, you have this community that's already been forming. You see people from cross games, other pros playing this, and Overwatch has already made itself into a viable community. So with those people banding together, it'll become an esport.
Still waiting for competitive Donkey Kong.
I think that a community is one thing, but the community has to be passionate enough and vocal enough to act and dedicated enough to actually make it legitimate esports. I think Melee is probably the most famous example of a community with no support whatsoever, just gritting their teeth and refusing to be let go. You know, they did not accept the fact that Melee was not going to be an esport. So they made it happen. Blizzard is not in the business of not making money. And if the community is not going to support it as an esport, then they're not going to waste their time, I don't think.
I honestly think that the combination of some of the MOBA style elements to the FPS could create something that is unique enough to stand on its own.
But that niche nestles between MOBAs and FPSs. So it's kind of getting, in my opinion, I see it getting sandwiched out a little bit by these two, since it has elements of both in some ways.
Let's say theoretically you're only going to be getting one person viewing one game. Is he going to be on the spectrum of Dota in complexity, or is he going to be in the spectrum of CSGO in complexity? Is there going to be that space in the middle where it'll be like, hey, this is actually my Goldilocks game where it's complex and simple at the same time.
One of the reasons why Counter-Strike is such an accessible esport is because the game itself is super simple. You have two teams, and if you kill the other team, you win. And I think that Overwatch doesn't do that properly. The core of that game isn't as simple as Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is so simple to understand on the surface, but it's so deep when you get into it that's what drives that esport. That's what drives people to that game.
Overwatch is a game your dad could play with you, and that's not something that you could easily say for Counter-Strike. And that doesn't mean that Overwatch is a worse game, it's just that, your dad could play Winston and jump into a group of people and taser them all. And this, like we've already spoken in the past about how this year is going to be big for the sort of mainstream acceptance of esports. We have CSGO that's going to be on television. Like we've talked about, is your dad going to watch CSGO on television? Probably not.
If there's one thing I think we can for sure, or be completely sure of, is that Blizzard's gonna make a ton of cash off of Overwatch. It's gonna be really popular when it first comes out, and I guess we'll have to take the wait and see approach.